Today I'm going to be looking at the Rubric for Advanced English Module C, Representation and Text. The elective I'm going to focus on is Elective 1, Representing People and Politics. The aim of the lesson is to help Year 12 students understand what HSC markers are looking for when marking this module, which will assist them with their study and essay writing. The text I'm going to be using as an example is Brave New World by Aldous Huxley. Look, however, if you're not studying Aldous Huxley, not studying Brave New World, I think you can still find this video valuable. The first place to look if you're trying to get an understanding of what the HSC markers are looking for in Module C is the marking rubric. I'm going to divide the rubric into small chunks and define and explain the key terms. The first part of the rubric reads, in this elective, students explore and evaluate various representations of people and politics in their prescribed texts and other related texts of their own choosing. Essentially, this is asking you to look at how people and their ideas are shown in Brave New World and a related text. The key words in this chunk are explore, evaluate, representations, and politics. The first word I'm going to define is representation. The concept of representation is what this module is all about. Representation is how meaning is conveyed by the composer. You need to approach your study and your exam essay looking through this lens of representation. It's important to remember that texts aren't truth, however objective they may appear. They're constructed. Composers make very conscious choices about the language they use, the images they show, the characters they create, and the situations these characters are placed in. In the HSC, you're expected to explore the reasons for the composer's choices. You need to be able to answer the question, what is the composer's purpose and perspective? The next two words, explore and evaluate, are verbs. And you have to remember that verbs are the muscles in your essay and creative writing. The judicious use of verbs will help you to communicate clearly and score well in your essays. What the markers are expecting when they ask you to explore the representation in the text is for you to inquire into it and discuss it in detail. When they're asking you to evaluate how meaning is conveyed by the composer, they're asking you to assess or judge the value of the meaning. The final word I'm going to look at in this chunk is politics. There are a number of different definitions for politics, but the definition that I really like for this module is the process of making uniform decisions applying to all members of the group. It also involves the use of power by one person to affect the behaviour of another person. The next part of the rubric that I'm going to analyse is they consider the ways in which texts represent individual, shared, or competing political perspectives, ideas, events, or situation. The key thing to analyse in this chunk is the idea of perspective. Perspective is encapsulated in the axiom that one man's terrorist is another man's freedom fighter. It all depends on the point of view. You have to remember that there are two point of views in play when you're reading Brave New World. Yours and Huxley's. And Huxley is using the medium, the textual features and language to try and influence you to accept his perspective. There is a link between representation and dominant perspective. And a few questions that are worth answering, whatever your text is for Module C, are which perspectives are or aren't presented? Whose perspective dominates and why? How is the perspective created and presented? The next part of the marking rubric that I want to examine is students analyse representation of people's political motivations and actions, as well as the impact political acts may have on individual lives or society more broadly. This section of the rubric is asking you to respond to the question, what motivated John the Savage to do what he did, and how was he set up by Huxley to act in this way? You can ask the same question about any of the characters in Brave New World. I think interesting characters for you to explore and evaluate would be Mustafa Mond and Lenina Crown. It is also asking you to consider what motivates the characters politically and what are the consequences, or even more simply, what led to this moment in the text and what are the consequences from here. The feedback from the Marking Centre for Module C after the 2015 HSC was, firstly, stronger responses demonstrated a perceptive understanding of how composers use different ways to construct meaning and evoke responses through textual features and details. Now, I'd encourage you to choose a related text that is a different form to your prescribed text. You don't have to, but I think it's a good idea because it really allows you to contrast the ways that different mediums and textual forms construct meaning. I think it's easier to write a stronger essay if you have this contrast. The next feedback was these responses presented a cohesive, focused, and incisive thesis that detail confidently and directly with the demands of the question. I think for this module, you can actually walk into the exam with a pre-prepared thesis because you know that the question is going to be about representation. Make sure you use words or synonyms of words from the rubric in your thesis statement. You then make your sub-theses link directly to the question. The next piece of feedback that the markers provided was that the analysis and evaluation of the textual evidence from the prescribed text and text of own choosing were used skillfully to consider how the unique act of representation in both texts evoked responses. Look, make sure you answer the question. You may have a pre-prepared essay, but if you do, practice adapting your responses to different questions. Your textual evidence needs to prove your thesis and sub-thesis statements. You are going to have to remember quite a few quotes for each text. Again, write them down. Turn them into a rap or mnemonic. Record them. Whatever works for you in order to remember them. The next piece of marker feedback is the exploration of how the text form, medium of production, language features, and purpose shape meaning was seamlessly integrated and used to further the thesis. What this means is don't just talk about the story and the characters of Brave New World. That's a kind of C-range response. Remember, Huxley has chosen to write a novel portraying a dystopian world which presents his fears for the future. He wants to influence his readers to act in ways that prevent these fears from becoming realities. So I'd encourage you, if you're a student and studying for the HSC, to review the feedback and the markers gave for last year's Module C and apply it to your own writing and study. So, look, putting together the 2015 markers feedback, I think the ingredients for a quality Module C response are creating a conceptual thesis that is grounded in representation, then having sub-theses that are actually linked to the question, having an integrated evaluation of the prescribed text and the text of your own choosing. You have to refer to the media of production, form, and structure. You have to consider how the composer's purpose and perspective have shaped the act of representation. And you need to balance your ideas with textual analysis. The final chunk of the rubric is, in their responding and composing, students develop their understanding of how the relationship between various textual forms, media of production, and language choices influences and shapes meaning. So let's just define some of the key terms in this chunk of rubric. The medium, or media of production, is basically asking you, how is this text made? Is it filmed, written, drawn, etc.? Now, textual form is asking you for the type of work. Is it poetry? Is it a novel? a short film, etc. Perspective is the point of view being offered on the subject by the composer. The choice of language, so obviously in a written text this is just language, however if you're watching a film, it's filmic. Basically, you need to talk about the techniques which help the composer to convey their message in this text. Okay, so now I'm going to really link the rubric and the marker's feedback directly to Brave New World. Huxley chose the written medium to articulate his fears concerning the misuse of technology and the over-bureaucratization of society. Huxley told a friend that he wrote Brave New World as a satire of H.G. Wells's utopias. However, the general consensus is that Brave New World is a dystopia, written as a warning for the reader. The world that Huxley creates could be dystopian or utopian, depending on your perspective. It's a fascinating paradox. The world that Mond and the other controllers have constructed has solved the problem of overpopulation, which threatens our own world. There is no hatred, jealousy, murder, or war. However, it comes at a cost. There is no literature, art, or love. Brave New World structure is reminiscent of Plato's Republic, and the key moment in the novel, the argument between Mustafa Mond and John the Savage, resembles a Socratic dialogue. There are some huge ideas and concepts explored in Brave New World. Huxley questions what it means to be human. For me, this is the key concept of the novel, which delves deeply into philosophy. The doctrine of utilitarianism justifies the control over society that the world controllers exert. Utilitarianism is the belief that an action is right insofar that it promotes happiness, and the greatest happiness of the greatest number should be the guiding principle of conduct. As a result, readers have to make an evaluation about what happiness is. In Brave New World, happiness is ethical hedonism. It's sex, soma, and unceasing consumerism. But is there more to life? John the Savage certainly believes that there is more to living than fulfilling one's superficial desires. He asserts that the pleasure experienced by the alphas, betas, gammas, deltas, and epsilons doesn't constitute happiness, as their restricted and heavily controlled lives mean that they haven't experienced the full gamut of human experience. John's views in his argument with Mond are echoed by the philosopher Robert Nozick. Nozick created a thought experiment, the experience machine, or pleasure machine, that asks us to imagine a machine that could give us whatever desirable or pleasurable experiences we could want. Psychologists have figured out a way to stimulate a person's brain to induce pleasurable experience that the person believes to be real. Nozick then asks, if given the choice, would we prefer the machine to real life? If this sounds familiar, it's pretty much the identical choice that Neo receives in The Matrix, when he has to choose between the blue and red pill. John the Savage chooses real life, which is demonstrated in the line, I want God, I want poetry, I want real danger, I want freedom, I want goodness, I want sin. One of the finest English teachers that I have encountered encourages students to find the quote in every text they study that encapsulates the composer's purpose. In Brave New World, I believe that this is the key quote. For me, the fundamental concept of the novel is the exploration of what it means to be human. And John the Savage voices Huxley's political concerns that the misuse of technology and the over-bureaucratization of society will strip people of their individuality and their humanity. And you've made it. To finish off, I want to encourage you to learn the rubric. Learn it as a rap. Write it out on A3 sheets and display it in your bedroom or toilet door, wherever you will see it. And once you've learned the rubric, use it. Use the keywords and the synonyms of the keywords in your thesis, subthesis, and essay. But remember to vary your vocabulary. Don't overuse a word. Also, make sure you read the markers' feedback from the previous year and apply their suggestions. This will help you to maximise your marks in the exam. And that's the end of the lesson. Thanks for watching, and good luck to all the students that are studying for their HSC exams.